Okay. We got a big group this morning, which is a wonderful thing. It also means we had fewer outlines printed out than I had anticipated. So Curtis is doing us the favor of running down and making some more. So if you didn't get an outline, they will be along momentarily. So, we need to get off of AB 1775. Enough of that. Enough of that for one morning. So the last time we got together, when we started talking about future topics, the consensus was we wanted to take a look at the real long view for recovery. You know, we talk sometimes about it taking 3 to 5 years, and what you can expect on that. I mean, what's really taking that long, and what's going on with that. So we're going to do that this morning because sobriety is only one piece of recovery from sexual addiction. Recovery is really about reclaiming your whole life. So as we go, we're going to speak both to what the addicts can expect and what the partners can expect. And the stages for the addict, if you're looking on your handout, are in the normal font, and the stages for the partners are in italics. And if you haven't got them yet, they're being copied. We'll get some more to you in just a moment. And there's some places for notes, so this isn't a fill in the blanks that you have to get that one nugget from us that goes in the blank like at school. It's just a place to give you some room to write if there's something that hits you that you want to write down. So, though it's not always the husband who's the addict, we are going to start by talking about what the reality is like when you first enter recovery for the addict and for the partner. And so by way of example, we're going to use one where the husband's the addict and look at his reality and her reality. So here we go. So his reality and her reality. I'm becoming a man of integrity.
I've been betrayed.
I've never loved her more.
I've never felt less loved or worthy.
I'm beginning to see how much I value our marriage.
I've never realized until now how little our marriage meant to him.
Finally, I'm an honest man.
How could he live a lie like this?
I've never felt so hopeful about the future.
The future has never looked so hopeless.
I feel like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders.
I feel so weighted down by all of this.
What a great feeling to not have to live in secrecy anymore.
I can't tell people about this. They won't understand.
This is the beginning of my well-being.
This is the end of my well-being.
She's beautiful to me.
I feel so self-conscious about my body.
I'm ready to commit to this marriage.
I don't know if I can stay in this marriage.
I'm no longer acting out and struggling with shame.
He should be ashamed of himself.
My future looks bright.
My future looks dim.
I understand the healing process takes 3 to 5 years. I'm sure I can complete it in a year or two.
5 years seems like a lifetime to deal with this pain.
So we want to look at that long-term view. Well, what do we mean by a 3 to 5 year process? What's taking so long, and what does the progress look like? So there's some stages you can expect as you go through recovery. And you'll notice that there's an overlap between these stages. So you may be in more than one stage at a time where you're working on different aspects of recovery from more than one stage. So for the addict, we're starting with the developing stage, the crisis decision stage, move into the shock stage, grief, repair, and then finally the growth stage.
The 6 stages of recovery for partners are very similar to the stages of recovery for addicts, although it begins with pre-discovery for partners. Typically, partners are about a year behind the addict in their recovery process. But these are the 6 stages: the pre-discovery stage, the crisis decision, information gathering stage, shock. 4th stage is grief, ambivalence. 5th stage is repair, and 6th stage is growth. And while this is up there, I just want to explain to you that the first 3 stages for partners, the focus is really at that time on the addict. They're totally thinking about the addict. They're oftentimes, dealing with trauma, and they just want to feel safe. And they're really watching the addict like a hawk, right? During the 4th stage, the grief stage, a big shift occurs, and they're deep in grief. They become sort of ambivalent about the relationship and a little bit ambivalent about what's going on with the addict most of the time. And instead, they're going through profound grief, which causes them to sort of look at themselves. And so from the 4th, 5th, and 6th stages, the focus is no longer on the addict, but the focus is on themselves. And that's when the real growth comes. So interesting how that works, that the grief sets the stage for the repair and the growth. So what I'm going to mostly be focusing on this morning is the repair and growth stages.
So the developing stage for the addict. So you're at a point where you may be starting to become aware that your acting out's a problem, but you're not quite all in yet. You may even at this point have tried group, or you may have even gone to therapy a time or two. But this is also a time where there can really be despair because you feel like you're wrestling with someone that's a whole bunch stronger than you and you just can't win.
From the inside, a hamster wheel looks like a career ladder. I loved this little slide this is exactly what it feels like to be a partner when you're in the pre-discovery stage. You know that there's something you're not seeing, you're missing something, but you don't know what it is. Partners say that they often wake up in the middle of the night, they pray, there's lots of anxiety, they just, for some reason marriage counseling isn't working, and what is it that I'm not seeing?
Okay. So then there's the crisis decision stage. So this can be one day, it can be a couple of months, but something happens that creates a crisis. And most commonly, that is a partner found out about some acting out. And so now there's a crisis. Or it could be that the acting out is creating problems at work or even legal problems. But now's the point at which your situations become so untenable that you're ready to commit to recovery no matter what.
So for partners, this stage is characterized by big ups and downs, emotional ups and downs. One moment you might have some hope, and the next moment you're completely feeling despair again. The relational trauma also has a tendency to trigger various other trauma responses. So if you've had any other kind of trauma in your life, it can trigger all those feelings back again. And fear tends to manifest itself as protective behaviors, meaning that I'm really afraid that the addict is going to act out. So I'm going to really police them. I'm going to put on my detective hat and become a detective here and try to find out everything and be on top of things, right? So those are protective behaviors, and they're trauma-based. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the emotional roller coaster going on this whole time. Partners often report nightmares and sleeplessness and obsessive thoughts, or else complete avoidance, almost like denial.
So we get a few months in, and the shock really starts to set in when you really start to realize how out of control things had gotten. And this is also a time where you really start to recognize some of that addictive thinking and those addictive thought processes for what they really were. And you begin to see your problems more clearly, and you're able to recognize your own excuses and rationalizations.
So the shock stage for partners, it's about the same. It's about 3 or 4 months into the process, and they experience a feeling of just being shattered, just shattered trust. They're suspicious. There's lots of despair and a lot of fear of the future.
So as you're working through that shock stage, then the next thing that happens is there's some grieving to be done, because this addiction has really cost you a lot. It's hurt you on self-esteem. It's hit you on relationally. It has probably cost you career-wise. It may have cost you financially. It may have cost you with legal problems. There can be any number of ways this thing has cost you. The other part of the grief stage is usually there were some losses going into it that led into the addiction. So the grief stage is also a time for mourning those losses as well.
So for partners, grief is mixed with ambivalence. So it's basically sitting with your losses and mourning those. And there's a variety of them. There's social losses, there's relational losses, all sorts of different losses, financial. They kind of run the gamut, right? And on top of that, there's some ambivalence about the relationship. Sometimes depression sets in, and oftentimes at this point, it's necessary for the partner to get some medication to help them through the depression. People that have never really experienced any kind of a prolonged depression before come in and they say, gosh, I've never felt this way before, and they're extremely depressed, and it's situational depression, but nevertheless, sometimes they need medication to help them through it. And people who are prone to depression tend to go into a very deep depression at this time. I think this is really, in some ways, the hardest of all the stages to go through. It seems to kind of drag on, and the only way to get through it is to sit with your losses and grieve them. So there's an increased self-examination, which, as we talked about earlier, is what leads us into the next two, which are repair and growth.
So far recovery doesn't sound like all that much fun. We've talked about crisis and shock and grief. So it does get better from there. So we get into repair, and this is really a time of being able to reconstruct your life and your work and your relationships. And it's changing some of those old interaction patterns, both kind of how you talk to yourself, those interaction patterns with yourself, and how you see yourself, and how you see others and interact with others.
So the repair stage for partners is really a meaty stage. A lot happens in this stage. Head knowledge starts to become heart knowledge. Up until this point, you're reading stuff and you're trying to put stuff in, into perspective, but it really becomes, you start to own it, it becomes yours at this point. And partners begin to think a little differently. And there's less thinking about the situation in absolutes. They're more able to sit with some temporary relational uncertainty, because sometimes, there's that uncertainty. You're not quite sure what's going to happen in the relationship. It's a wait and see thing. So there's the self-examination. I'm willing to look at myself. Family of origin issues are explored during this stage. And that's a big piece, because it means that I have to face the fact that maybe there were some traumatic events from my childhood, and maybe there is no such a thing as a perfect family. Maybe I can hold the fact that my parents, who I dearly love, had both a positive and a negative impact on me. So being able to sit with that is a huge part of being able to move forward in this process. So losses are also more fully understood and grieved. Partners now have tools to create more safety for themselves, such as boundaries. So boundaries are a part of how we take care of ourselves and create a reasonable measure of safety, right? In this process, it's not going to feel completely safe. If you're living with an addict and they're struggling, it's not going to feel completely safe. But the boundaries give you a reasonable measure of safety. So relationships also become more authentic. That happens really for several reasons. So oftentimes, up until this point, the relationship might have felt one-sided to you. And you might not have understood why. But when both people are in recovery, the relationship suddenly becomes more reciprocal. And you start to realize that it's important to have other people in your life. You need to have relationships. Nobody heals in a vacuum. And so you start to kind of open your heart and your mind to the possibility of sharing more of yourself and being more authentic and more real about your feelings and the things that are going on in your life. Most people tell me that they've become a better parent through the process. And in part, that's because when you understand your family of origin and when you understand how it affected you, it makes a big difference in how you parent your children. So they start to realize that trying to manage or control or fix the addict is a big waste of time. This is huge progress because, again, it shows that the focus is on themselves instead of on the addict.
So change is just ahead. We come to the growth stage. So this is where it really starts to get good, because now there's really a new depth of your relationships. There's a new experience of the full experience of being a human being. New levels of openness and effectiveness. This is where that real second order change that we've talked about before comes into play.
I want to read you something. It's actually it's a paraphrase of Romans 8:28. It says, God uses the natural effects of sin to conform us into relationally mature individuals. Boy, is that ever true in this process, right? This process is going to mature you. If you're not mature by the time you get here, you will be when you're done. Yeah, whether you wanted to be or not. So at this point, partners don't feel quite so oppressed anymore in the growth stage. There's decreased feelings of being victimized. In part, it's because their focus isn't on the addict, but it's more on themselves, right? Also because partners begin to see the benefits to this process. Their eyes have been opened and there's no going back to Egypt now.
Okay. So most of you, if you've moved into leadership, are probably past those early stages of recovery. And you're either working through the repair or the growth stage or both. So we want to look at those stages from a view of the fruits of the Spirit and what you can expect as you go through that. So Paul's letter to the Galatian church is in large part a treatise against legalism. In chapter 5, Paul contrasts the fruits of the Spirit with the works of the flesh. And many addicts grew up in very rigid, disengaged families. Rules were applied in a very legalistic fashion. There was probably little flexibility in leadership, and there's probably really very little true intimacy. And often when I'm working with a guy and I hear his story, I have to tell him what happened to you was going to come up someplace. You could have become an alcoholic or a drug addict or a compulsive gambler. You could have been acting out this rage that you had with violent acts, but this is how it came out for you. So dealing with the behavior is important, but we also need to help you work through your trauma and be able to recover your life. So if there's been a legacy of dysfunction in your family, we really want to help you have it stop with you, that it doesn't get passed down through any more generations, and you're the place where the change happens in a positive direction. So what does it look like to be getting better? And what can you expect as you go through the repair and growth stage of recovery? Well, what you can expect is to see more fruits of the Spirit. So we'll look at those for the addict and for the partner, and we'll follow them in the order that Paul presented them, though they are not in any particular order as you go through recovery. So first, the fruit of the Spirit of love. So first thing on there is one of the ways you can see this evidenced is growing empathy. Addicts, when you're in your addiction, are notoriously poor at empathy. Being able to understand the experience of another and actually being able to care about the experience of another, when we first start, can seem like a foreign concept. And sometimes if your partner is distressed about something, and I say, since I mostly work with guys, what do you think's going on for her? A lot of times the answer is going to be, I don't know. Further, empathy is not just about understanding what someone else is experiencing, but about actually caring about that experience. So if you were rarely on the receiving end of empathy growing up, this does not come naturally to you. So as you get healthy and work through the repair and growth stages of recovery, you should expect that this will start to become more natural to you. And as it does, that leads to the ability to attunement, to be able to have that connection with someone else, understand what's going on with them, pick up on those cues, be able to experience that oneness with another human being, and have this real intimate connection. So, which leads us into attachment. So attachment looks at the way we connect with other people in close relationships. And this is where intimacy occurs, because from cradle to grave, human beings need people in their lives. We need people to whom we matter, who are accessible to us, who will be responsive to us, that we can turn to at times of stress for comfort and support. So when we were kids, the more we had secure attachment at home, the more mom and dad were a safe place for us and a secure base, the more we could boldly go out and explore our world, knowing that we've always got a secure place to come back to. When we get to be adults, it's a little different, but it's still there. We need that secure base of people to whom we matter. So if your parents were not a secure base to you, you probably learned to get by without that close intimacy, and may in fact not be very comfortable with real intimacy. So in recovery, we learn to be vulnerable and experience true intimacy. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the great love chapter that Paul was writing to the Corinthians church, when he gets to chapter 12, he's talking about future in heaven, that now I know in part, then I will know just as I am fully known. I will know fully. So this being able to be vulnerable enough to know and be fully known, that's what true intimacy is about. And that's part of this fruit of the Spirit.
Okay, so just a little disclaimer here. Scott and I both graduated from Bethel Seminary, and so we've had a lot of theology. We could get into this ad nauseum, but we're kind of cutting it short. We're just bringing out a few points here. So it's not comprehensive, just want to warn you about that. So, so humility is being able to see yourself accurately, right? So the Bible tells us that love is not conceited, arrogant, or inflated with pride. So in fact, love is really humble, right? And what is humility? It's being able to size yourself up accurately. My strengths and my weaknesses. This is an area where, okay, over here, I'm a great parent. I'm great with, you know, disciplining my kids. But over here, I struggle when it comes, you know, to you know, whatever it is, right? So that's what humility is. It's being able to look at myself honestly, see my strengths, my weaknesses. So humble people tend to feel safe and accessible to us, right? We always gravitate to humble people. They're nice to be with, right? So during this process, partners start to size up. You know, gosh, what am I good at? What, you know, well, I can see over here that I'm really not good at understanding myself. But over on my strength is that I'm very compassionate, right? So at first, partners tend to be over empathetic with others, right? That tends to be their pattern when they come into this process, which is stark opposite of the addict, who tends to not be empathetic to others, right? So it takes humility to reach out and ask for help. So what does this look like in the growth and repair stage? It looks like partners reaching out and creating support systems for themselves. So the second point is increasing respect for self and the addict. So Ephesians 5:33 tells women to respect their husbands. And what does that mean? It really means to be in awe of them, right? And I can tell you that when a couple first comes and sits down in my office, if you told them that, they would look at you like you were crazy. It's like the addict doesn't think that she's ever going to be in awe again, if the addict is the male, and the partner doesn't think that they're ever going to feel in awe again. Is that possible? Is it possible for that to happen? Yes, it is. And as partners begin to see the addict as a person apart from the addiction, appreciation begins to grow. So emotional intimacy and attachment increase, which is the foundation for trust. So what happens is, partners come to this place where they start to develop this deep appreciation. They start to say, wow, that took a lot of hard work. That took a lot of commitment. I can really appreciate what it took to get your life back on track. And so in an odd sort of way, this whole process can actually usher in the kind of respect and awe that God meant for people to have in their relationships. So what this looks like in the recovery, in the repair and growth stage, is an appreciation for the addict's valiant fight, right?
Okay. So the fruit of the Spirit, joy. So joy is an emotion, but there are ways that you can nurture joy as you nurture yourself. Because again, recovery was never just about stopping the behavior, but about reclaiming your life. So this is why when we're working with someone, we don't just create an abstinence list and just go, okay, these are the things you're not going to do anymore, but we look at a healthy life plan. And fortunately, our brains have this great neuroplasticity to them, which is to say they can change. So as we quit doing unhealthy behaviors, we're essentially rewiring our brains. And what it allows us to do is recover those pleasure centers in your brain. So what this looks like in long-term recovery is that you're able to embrace healthy pleasures. So in recovery, you've given up something that was unhealthy and damaging, but nevertheless, it was pleasurable for you. So recovery is not about adopting an aesthetic lifestyle, but it's about learning to have healthy ways to enjoy life. Then as you do that, there's the mindset of gratitude. Now, generally in addiction, most addicts have a grievance story that you tell yourself or anybody else who might be willing to listen about how you've been done wrong. And we use it as a way to justify the things that we do and our acting out. We use it for that sense of entitlement. So as you're in the growth stage, you want to be able to develop this mindset of gratitude, this gratitude list that you can go to, that you can offset that grievance story instead with the positive things that are happening in your life and the things that you're grateful for. Then that leads into learning to savor the gift of life, because life is not easy, but it is good. So most of us are not going to achieve fame and fortune. And even if you do, the joy cannot be in the destination. It has to be in the journey. We have to be able to find it in the mundane tasks of living. The more life is not just about you, the more you can actually experience joy in your life.
Okay, hopeful fortitude. We're going to talk about hopeful fortitude. The verse, "The joy of the Lord is my strength," it implies that joy and hardship go together. It's a lovely little verse, but when you think about it, when you really read it over and over again, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a real message here. God sends us little signs of encouragement so that we know He's near when we're going through hardships. And this struggle among partners, what they go through during this process, the trauma, the pain, the trying to heal, all the feelings of self-doubt, all the feelings that go with this, God is present during those, and He gives you little signposts of encouragement along the way. We can go through almost any horrific, difficult circumstance, if we know that God is right beside us. And so he gives us these little things to encourage us along the way. And I think that's a big part of what joy is. It strengthens us and moves us forward through this difficult process. Partners tend to see the gifts that the addiction has brought. And that also is a piece of joy. There's maturity. They're better parents. There's knowledge of self. I often hear partners say, gosh, I didn't sign up for this. This would have terrified me, but nothing in my life has brought me to this place of more maturity and more growth. I like myself better. I'm a better parent. I know how to communicate. I know what healthy looks like. These are all parts of the journey. So what does that look like in recovery for spouses? It looks like joy is grace recognized, right? It's walking in the grace that God provides for situations like this. It's having a vision to where the partner wants to be apart from the addict, which looks like, I really hope this works out. I hope this relationship is able to heal and mend. I hope the addict is able to do his work. But if not, this is a journey I'm on with God. Either way, I'm on this journey. So the second bullet point is empowerment, right? Well, the brain organizes chaotic experiences into a meaningful whole. So empowerment is vital because it's part of the process of change. It gives us a forward focus, and it helps us to avoid being overwhelmed by the adversity. So what does this look like in the process of healing, of repair and growth? It looks like increased confidence and less anxiety for the partners. It looks like more emotional stability. Okay?
So the fruit of the Spirit, peace. So many addicts have trauma history. And often this has been the reason for your acting out, to try and deal with that lack of peace that you've had. So during the repair and growth stages, this is really an opportunity for us to resolve the trauma. And if you do this well, you get to a place where the trauma that you experienced is now just something bad that happened to you, and not something that has any control over you or any power over you in your present or your future. Along that same line, you learn affect regulation. And what that means is we need to be able to self-soothe, because everybody does. So as you work through repair and growth, you're better able to maintain your emotional regulation. This is just part of maturity. Now, I have my own Big Bang Theory. And my Big Bang Theory goes like this. When we're born, our emotions are all over the place, right? It's like a big bang. Whatever's happening right now, that's how life is now and forever. So if I'm fed and comfortable, life is perfect. It's always been perfect. If I'm uncomfortable or hungry or alone, life is awful. It's always been awful. It's always going to be awful. And as we mature, we get to where we're better able to regulate our own emotional experience. So we know that the current moment does not define our whole existence. A difficult moment does not mean that life is awful, any more than a great moment means that life is perfect.
So the word peace comes from the Greek word eirene. So that is actually similar to the word shalom, which means wholeness and tranquility. My well-being is not contingent on the addict. Right? So wholeness must be discovered within community. You can't find your wholeness within one person. Partners of addicts need to learn that, because initially there's often this belief that, my wholeness is with this person, but no, wholeness is really discovered within community. So a healthy relationship is like the icing on the cake, but it's not the whole cake. Partners need to really understand that it's not the whole cake. So holding the relationship up with an open hand is really important for growth, for being able to move forward and heal for the partner. So what does that look like? It looks like less emotional dependency on the addict. So second bullet point, inner stability that produces peaceful conduct, right? I mean, we're all in favor of peaceful conduct here, right? Especially if you're an addict, right? This process, if anything, stirs up a lot of unpeaceful conduct. So peace brings order out of chaos. It's an inner stability that keeps our conduct peaceful in the midst of nerve-wracking events. So I want to read to you Psalm 40, verse 2. It says, "He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise," right? So that's where we get our inner stability. So peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of God no matter what the conflict.
So fruit of the Spirit, patience. So if you grew up with the King James Version, this word was actually translated long-suffering in that version. And like my grandmother used to say, the King James is good enough for the Apostle Paul, it's good enough for me. Sometimes people don't know I'm joking when I say that. So thanks for laughing. So a couple of things that happen here. One is recovery inherently involves a certain amount of suffering. Usually what you were doing, you were using it to numb out. So there's a couple of things that are going to happen here. One is that now you have to learn to deal with your own emotional experience. And as you work through repair and growth and get healthier, you're able to deal with that. The other piece of that, where the suffering is going to come in, is there's usually been some damage that's been done. And so to really be able to have the courage to lean into that and deal with that is an important part of those stages. So additionally, things are seldom black and white. So we need to learn to tolerate ambiguity. Things are rarely this or that, but both. So as you work through the growth stage of recovery, you get better at tolerating some ambiguity.
Okay. So patience comes from the Greek word makrothumia, meaning that the person has the power to exercise revenge, but chooses restraint. So as Scott and I were putting together our talk, I noticed that he was using the word long-suffering as he was putting his stuff together, and we had a little talk about that. I said, Scott, I'm not using that word. You know, that conjures up images for a lot of people of a codependent stuck in this just years of frustration, right? Just beating their head against the wall. But that's not what the word means. The word actually, it implies a quality of self-restraint. It means refusing to deal inappropriately with my trying circumstances. So, what does this look like for repair and growth stages? It's a realization that inappropriate anger can become part of the problem. I tell partners often, you know, you have to be angry. It's normal to be angry, and you need to be angry. I'm sure God is angry. But working through that anger is the important part of your healing. You can't act like it's not there. You can't deny it. You have to be real about it, and you have to work through it. But if you give in to the anger, if you let the anger rule you, then you become the focus, and you take the focus off the real problem. So next slide. Oh, by the way, I want to read you did you read the little quote there? I thought it was a cute quote. It says, "Patience is not the ability to wait, but how you act while you're waiting." Like that. So next one. Okay. So it's bullet point number 2. It's allowing time for change in healing. So change is generally a slow process. People change 1 degree at a time. And partners have to understand that. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a 3 to 5 year process for a reason. There's a lot going on inside, and change is slow. The other thing is that change is really God's work. As a therapist, I feel privileged for God to speak through me sometimes, but I never change anybody. It's God that changes people. So what does this look like in the repair and growth stage? It looks like partners learning to stop pushing the river. They learn to stop pushing the river. Third point, it's choosing to deal appropriately with trying situations. So partners get a bad rap, especially in the first 3 stages of recovery, because they're so reactive. But what they really want is they want accountability, they want truth, and they want safety. They want their safety back again in the relationship. So they come to know in this part of patience, they come to know that they're responsible for their behaviors and how they create safety. So what this looks like is they're less likely to snoop, and they come to see playing detective as a form of their own acting out. A lot of people don't realize that partners can act out too, and being a detective is just another form of partner acting out.
So kindness. So kindness is another byproduct of empathy. And when you can both understand and care about what's going on for someone else, kindness flows more naturally from that. So this is not about just being ingratiating or doing something out of compunction or giving up healthy control. Addicts in recovery will sometimes take this one down position to buy a peace or to atone, but the fruit of the Spirit is about a genuine caring that builds as you get healthy. So in recovery, you also need to have a mutual support system. So you learn also to be able to accept support from others and be able to give support to others. And then as this kindness builds, there's also room for the trust of others, to be trust of self and trust of others as you learn to be kind to yourself.
Okay. So kindness is not about being nice, but it's acting for the welfare of others. Sometimes that means boundaries, right? Boundaries are for us, but boundaries create safety for everybody. So when God designed a partner for Adam, when he designed Eve, he was looking for a suitable helper. We see in Genesis 2:20. Right there, that takes a lot of pressure off of partners, right? You need to be a suitable helper. You don't have to be perfect. But a good quality in a suitable helper is being able to be smart with boundaries, because boundaries create order. Not only order for myself, but order for the family. So what does this look like? It looks like partners setting boundaries with no motive of changing the addict. Their motive is to create safety for themselves and to provide an atmosphere of safety for the family. But never in their boundary setting is there the motive of trying to do something to change the addict. So second bullet point, speaking the truth with love. So speaking the truth with love is hard to do when you're upset, when there's a lot of emotions going on. It's hard to do that without stuffing your feelings or bludgeoning your partner. But that's what needs to happen. That's what speaking the truth means. It means being honest, but from a spirit of humility. Conflicts and disagreements, they're going to happen in every relationship. They're really inevitable, and they're actually good. And I want to read you a quote from Ruth Bell Graham. I love this quote. She said, "If 2 people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary." I love that. I absolutely love that quote. So what does this look like in the repair and growth stage? It looks like using I messages, being assertive, but not passive or aggressive, being respectful in communication. That's kind. So the last bullet point, owning my own stuff. I think we act out the things that we can't say with words. Addicts tend to act out their inner pain with their addiction. But it's not just addicts that do this. I think to some degree, pretty much everybody does this. So healing is about finding the right words. Partners often divorce themselves from their needs and feelings. They often grew up in childhood learning to do that, and they bring that into the relationship. So owning my own stuff looks like learning to understand my own feelings and my motives.
Okay, so goodness. So why do we do what we do? Why do we do good works? It's not to be acceptable. You're already accepted. It's not to be secure. You're already secure. It's not to be significant. You're already significant. So, as you get healthy, this goodness starts to flow really just from a good, healthy place of that fruit of the Spirit. And part of that is goodness to self. That self-care is an essential part of repair and growth, and you need to be good to yourself. And then the other part is goodness to others. There's some healing that needs to take place, and part of this goodness is actually caring about someone else's well-being and working toward their good.
So goodness is upright of heart in life, and the first part of goodness is embracing truth. So the basic task of recovery is to lead people out of confusion and into truth. Oftentimes, partners of addicts will say, I don't need help, it's the addict's problem. They've got the problem, there's nothing wrong with me. But partners do need help. They need support, they need tools for recovery, and they need healing. Partners tend to repeat the patterns if they don't get help for themselves. So Stephanie Carnes talks about a study where, partners of addicts continue to marry the same person but with a different face over and over and over. Research backs that up. So what does this look like in recovery? It looks like the introspection and the self-examination that I need to get myself healthy to move forward. So the second part of goodness is fairness, treating the addict with dignity and respect. Somewhere in the process, the addict stops becoming a villain and starts becoming a wounded friend again. It's amazing how this happens, but when people talk from their hearts, when people start to really understand each other, when the tension goes way down and people can actually hear each other, things change and people start to see each other different. So what this looks like is managing others is disrespectful. You start to realize, gosh, I've been managing my addict partner and my addict spouse, and this is disrespectful. So partners start to change that. It means speaking up without being accusatory or shaming. So it's having a voice, definitely not being a doormat, but doing it in such a way where the addict is able to hear it and receive it.
So faithfulness. So faithfulness is about becoming reliable. In relationship, coming to a place of trust where you can trust yourself and you can trust someone else, just as you are reliable. So tying back into kindness, faithfulness has this dynamic of learning to trust and be trustworthy, because your addiction betrayed trust, and trust does not come back overnight. It takes a long period of faithfulness to restore that.
So it's commitment. It's guarding the relationship from potential resentment. It's actually renewed commitment with wide open eyes. So initially partners come in and they feel duped, they feel tricked, they feel angry. They didn't ask for this and they're really mad, and rightly so. But eventually it comes to a point where they start to think, I'm not staying here because I need you to survive anymore. I'm not staying here, even because I'm lonely. But I see us getting healthier. And I think we're on the verge of getting the kind of marriage that we always wanted. So in the beginning, I may have stayed out of shock, didn't know what else to do, but now I'm staying because I see something. I see something of value in us that I may not have ever seen before. So what this looks like in the growth and repair stages, it's reevaluating and making choices from a healthy place rather than from a place of trauma or codependency. It's decision making about the relationship. If the addict isn't willing to do their work, if there isn't change, likewise the partner may also say, you know, this isn't healthy. This isn't healthy, and I'm going to make some healthier choices for me.
So gentleness. Gentleness is about restrained power. St. Francis de Sales is quoted as saying, "Nothing is so strong as gentleness, and nothing so gentle as real strength." So gentleness is that restrained power, but it's empowering to yourself and to your partner. And if your partner has been hurt by what you have done, one of the ways he or she is going to know that you're getting better is by this emerging of a gentle spirit.
So gentleness is meekness without weakness. I'm going to read you this quote. It says, "The ability to struggle well and rebound from disruptive life challenges by living and loving fully and without being blocked from growth or trapped by anger or blame." That really kind of sums up what meekness without weakness and gentleness really is. It's best described as gentle strength. And what does this look like in the repair and growth stages? It looks like my trauma no longer dictates how I'm going to respond, right? I'm wisely choosing my responses, and it affects all areas of my life. So I want to tell you a little scenario. Addict comes home. Addict says, "Hey, I'm having a really hard time today, and I'm really tempted to act out. I'm thinking about my old porn sites, and I'm really struggling," right? So what does gentleness look like? It's not the partner trying to change the addict's feelings. It's not the partner trying to defend their own position and say, "Well, you got to think about me and the kids. What about us? You can't be doing stuff like this." It's not shaming them. It's not blame. It's not placating. And it's not fixing. It looks like this. "Wow, that must be tough. I'll pray for you." So that's what gentleness looks like. Partners refuse to play an intrusive role in the addict's recovery. And there's no more illusions that the partner can make the addict better or keep the addict from acting out.
Okay, finally, self-control. Paul put this last on the list, but in recovery it needs to start fairly early on in the process. So as we develop a sobriety plan, it generally involves developing some boundaries. And one of the ways that I can tell someone is really getting better is their relationship with their boundaries. When you get to a point that boundaries are your friend and not your jailer, you're getting to a really healthy point, because addicts hate boundaries and addicts hate being controlled. Healthy, mature individuals learn to value boundaries. The self-control also shows up in other areas of your life. So your finances, how do you exhibit self-control and how you handle those? Your self-care and how you take care of yourself, do you exhibit self-control there? In your interactions with others, do you own your own responses? Someone else did not make you do it. You have responsibility for your own reactions. So this also involves the boundaries of others. Your partner has the right and responsibility to establish his or her own boundaries, and so you need to respect those.
Self-control, having mastery over one's own behavior. We are called to self-control, not other control. So during the beginning stages, when there's lots of trauma, the brain looks for ways to create safety. So partners often resort to managing or controlling the addict. But I want to read to you a verse. It's Proverbs 2:10. It says, "For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul." In other words, as truth is revealed and embraced, a person's desires and affections will naturally realign. So what does this look like for partners? And it really looks like a shift in their thinking. And towards the last stages, partners come in and they start to say, I just want to get myself healthy. The focus totally begins to be on them, right?
I'd like to make one final point on legalism here, and that's that addicts often tend to see things as black and white. Things are binary, they're ones and zeros, they either are there or they're not. And this is really not how life works. With each of these fruits, it's not that either you have them or you don't, but you're somewhere on a journey. You're somewhere on a continuum there. The process of sanctification is a lifelong process, and in some respects, the growth stage of recovery really never ends.
So in closing, I want to read you a quote from John Eldredge. He's one of my favorite authors. He says, "God is a romantic at heart. He is a jealous lover, and his jealousy is for the hearts of his people and for their freedom." So in finding God's love, people become free from the bondage of past sins and future sins, and free from feelings of mediocrity, and also free from self-imposed limitations. So that's what the future holds for followers of Christ. And I want to leave you with a verse, and it's Philippians 4:13, and I think it sums up what we've talked about today. It says, "I can do everything in him who gives me strength."
Amen. Amen. We wish you blessings on your journey.